Welcome to episode 29 of the Parallel Physiques podcast, everyone. This is part 2 of our conversation with Robbi Jenkins on her road to the Amateur Olympia. This time, this conversation is a little different. We dig in with Robbi, not so much about the training and the food and all of those things, but we really dig in this episode about her mindset. Not just the mindset she had going into the Olympia, but how she came to change her mindset through this process so that she could prioritize herself, she could go all in, she could do the work, and really ground herself toward making that goal happen. This is for everyone. Come on in, take a listen. Welcome to the podcast, everyone. This is part 2. So excited to be here talking to Robbi Jenkins again. We are starting kind of where we left off last time. Last time we learned a lot about Robbi, and I know everyone that I've heard from and all the comments I've seen, people were very excited to hear your story, Robbi, about kind of where you've been and how bodybuilding has worked for you. It's a really interesting story. So super excited to move from that place, because last we left off was when you and Kenneth got, quote, back together, and started the journey up to where we are today, post Amateur Olympia.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So I think I said this on the podcast before, but there was a point where I had made a post or something and Robbi had reached out and it was like, "Hey dude, I miss you. Like, can I come back? I'm sitting in a shit show sort of situation." But she didn't say that directly. She said that when I got on the phone with her. She was like, my coach can't read my blood work. We're not working through what issues I have that she basically had the whole time. And what was going on is Robbi was slightly estrogen dominant. She had downregulated hormones. She had gut dysbiosis, probably some of the worst case gut dysbiosis I'd had up until that point. Now there's people that have beat me or beat her at this point. She's nothing in comparison to some people now that I've dealt with. So, a lot of that, like we mentioned before, was really driven by her mental health. And the mental health portion of all of it was one of the most difficult things to sort of wrangle with Robbi, because of all the various things that she's gone through in her life. And it's not just, the previous conversation about, the crazy marriage with the open situation and the girlfriend and the terrible husband and all that stuff. And it's not that it was terrible all the time, I'm sure, just like anything else. There's good and bad times, but Robbi's had sort of an up and down, to say the least, upbringing, and had some trauma happen in the past. And I don't know that we need to dive into that stuff at all, but the key is, and what I say to people a lot of the time, is your body follows where your brain goes. And the truth of it all, Robbi was one of the most neurotic clients that I've ever had in the entirety of my coaching career. I got one that's trying to meet you back where you were right now. But other than that, like, it was a really difficult time just trying to get her to, how would you describe it, Robbi? Like, I think about like emotions, express those emotions at times. Cause you're like a bottler upper type of person. And not only that, but your communication wasn't great. There's just sort of a myriad of things where it compiled into this situation that every time we tried to go through a gut protocol, it failed. And we're talking like we feel like we were doing really well, and we get to the very end, and 1 week later, it's like, damn, we're already back to where we were. You remember that time? You remember the very first one? It was like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh. So now, with that all being said, can you pick up from where I left off?
Yeah. So I'd left for a little bit. It just wasn't the same. So talked to you, decided that I was going to come back, and
And can I just
kind
say,
of
anybody that leaves me always comes back and always says it's just not the same.
same. True. But now I think I realized a lot of like I had that like couple months where I could really kind of think about everything and how I was taking everything. And I think one, I knew for sure without a doubt that you had my best interests at heart.
Yes.
And then you understood me as, I mean, pretty much at that point, probably understood me better than anybody else that I knew too. But then I also had
I think I
a
might
little bit of,
still hold that, right? Except for Scott, maybe. Like
it's
I hold a pretty high. I'm pretty high up there.
you're you're up there. But yeah, and then part of it too is realizing, like you said, I was a bottle upper. A lot of that was just kind of from childhood. I grew up in a family. It wasn't necessarily like a terrible childhood or anything. Like my parents weren't bad. It's just they were raised. We don't display emotions. Bad things happen. We don't talk about it, think about it. We just move on. And I was always a sensitive kid, and I would get like made fun of for it. So like I was always trying to do that because that was all I knew. And then communicating wise, like my family didn't talk. So like I never learned how to communicate. So I started realizing where a lot of it was just maybe not necessarily like my fault in why I was the way that I was, but like
100%.
it was my responsibility to change it.
100%.
And I felt like the best way for me to do that and still do bodybuilding was also coming back to you, because I knew you do a really good job with me in that, like, you don't push me faster than I'm ready to go. Like you might push me a little bit, but like if you can tell I'm not there yet, you'll pump the brakes a bit and kind of ease back, and like that that's exactly what I need. Because usually if you do that and I don't feel backed into a corner, like I'm gonna end up doing the right thing. It's just I can't feel like I'm being strong to do it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I got back into coaching with you, and then I was just over it. I was over it. I was tired of gut protocols. I think we'd been doing it for like a year and a half at that point.
Yeah.
Year. And they're not fun. It's basically like being excited about. It's just like this nonstop hamster wheel of carrying my bead box of supplements around everywhere I go.
Well,
So
I
I
mean, it's
finally
not
was
just
like,
that,
all
but
right.
it's the die-off symptoms that were pretty rough on you too. Like I remember even that. So we went through 3 gut protocols. One in the beginning of 2022.
That it.
Yeah, it was only 3, but the one lasted for a really long time. So in 2022, when we first started, and you were like, "Okay, let's go," um, you were still in a gut protocol in September when you left, and you left,
Yeah.
you know, right there at the end, and you were just kind of like, "I'm waving the white flag here." And so at that point, I had started to learn about hybrid protocols, and I had given you some rifaximin. And, it's interesting, rifaximin is very expensive when you go through the doctor. So, you know, my little coaching community, we're resourceful individuals. So we've been able to find rifaximin for less expensive than what you could through your standard doctor without insurance, and that's 99.9% of the case when you get it prescribed. But what I'll say is I gave you 1 round of that, And I didn't know the right things to pair with it to make sure that you came out on the other end. So when you left, worked with the other coach briefly, and then you came back, we had to kind of like fix that part. So we went through
Yeah.
another gut protocol, and we I don't think we got everything because there was just been so much time between GI maps, right? And so now here we are, and we're at the end of this second gut protocol. It seems like it had stuck, I should say, stuck. So once it stuck, then we're like, okay, let's go into prep. And I remember thinking, this should go easy. Like this prep should be the easiest prep that we've ever had. And then
What's
it
the
kind of
time
got a
frame on
little
that? When
rocky.
was that?
May
Okay,
is when we started. And the
2023.
part of the conversation I had with Robbi was, all right, girl, you come back. It's my way. We're gonna do it my way. You're gonna stop fighting me, and you're gonna cool your jets. You're gonna fucking deal with your shit. And she did. She really did. There were some things, and I don't remember the specific time frames, but there were certain times where I was talking to you, and I remember thinking, who is this person on the other end of the line? Like, it was like the only thing I could probably equate it to is probably what parents feel like when they've told their child, "Hey, go to bed and don't wake up until X time. Don't wake up until X time. Don't knock on the door. Don't wake up your siblings. Stay asleep until X time in the morning." And then finally, when they finally do it, you're probably so overjoyed that you're like emotional about it. And I don't know if you remember, but I was. Like I was
Yeah.
emotional over the fact that you had gotten past a lot of these mental issues that I had seen sort of unfold over the last, 2 years. And we get into prep. And then I'll say this, and then Robbi can take us through the rest of it. And I kind of want to go through like the full detail of whatever you want to dive into. We can talk about the diet, we can talk about the protocol, we can talk about the PEDs, we can talk about the things you learned. Because I'll say this, I saw you change more than I've ever seen anybody change mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and physically in this prep. I don't I don't know. I know part of it, but I don't think I even know all of it because it's been an internal thing for you. So if you want to dive into that part of it, I think it would be helpful for people because you did document it along the way, but it's difficult to know or I don't know how to pull out what I saw happen because I know you so well. And then by the end of the prep, I mean, how many times have I cried through the prep? It's like I'm watching you
Well,
change,
that's
right?
not unusual. I mean, come
Well,
on.
no, it's not unusual. Thank you, friends. Feeling attacked over here. But I'm just going to be honest with you. Like, if I'm crying, that means I'm emotionally invested in you. And being emotionally invested, it's an exhausting thing. So, but it's a good thing, especially when you see somebody start to get it, or when you see somebody like really be successful. And I'm looking at your arms right now, and they're freaking lean, got a vein running through it, and I'm so proud of where you're sitting. 3 weeks post show. 3 weeks post show, freaking 2.5 years ago, you were Fatty McFat Pants eating whatever the hell you wanted. So like you're killing it in so many different ways, right? So like ultimately the emotion is that I'm proud. And I get that way with my competitors. And hell, I get that way with my lifestyle clients. They just don't always give me the best results because they're the most knuckleheaded ones. Yeah, you know who you are. So you just Yeah. So anyway, we start prep. Your weight's not dropping. And something that's pretty consistent in people who are estrogen dominant, their upper body is leaner than their lower body. And Robbi has always been that way. And her blood work said she was estrogen dominant, all the things. She's on progesterone at this point. So we know from a hormone perspective, she shouldn't be estrogen dominant anymore. If she is, it's because the conversion in her gut isn't doing well. So I'm sitting there and I'm like, I'm thinking about all the antibiotics that I can get my hands on. And here I am, I'm placing an order. And I'm like, I'm getting that one, and I'm getting that one, and I'm getting that one. How many was it, Robbi?
I don't know, but it was miserable because I remember when I started it, Scott and I took our first trip to Wilmington, and it was miserable. Like the dial,
yeah.
That I was insomniac one night. There was one that you gave me that I messaged you about. I literally had the taste of quarters. It was like I had been sucking on dirty quarters for like 3 days straight.
That's the parasite one. Yeah, that's the parasite one. Yeah. So I had to cover H. pylori, fungus or candida, parasites, and SIBO. And I think there was one other thing I did. I literally, it was like a freaking atomic bomb that I dropped on Robbi's gut. And I was like, if we make it out alive, then we're solid. And sure enough, we did. And the weight started to drop soon after that, fairly quickly. And as you can see, if you go back on Robbi's page and you look at all the posts, she was the leanest she'd ever been for any show.
Yeah.
So from that perspective, it was a huge win. But now I'll kind of turn it back to you and you can kind of take it from here.
Yeah. I remember you gave me that gut protocol and I was like, you're fucking insane. Like this is terrible. And then as soon as I started it, it was like every side effect in the book from every medication. It was like, oh, well, there's that one. It's like, oh, well, there's that one. But no, I mean, I think I was just finally at a point where I put all the work into what I could do. And I think at that point I hadn't deep dove as much into my faith yet. I definitely was, but not to the extent I did post that point.
So you mean all the antibiotics brought you back to Jesus? There's a true there's a true come to Jesus moment, right? All the antibiotics.
Oh man, that's so good.
Yeah.
That's funny. But no, I think I was just done. Like I was just and the biggest thing was I started to believe that I could actually do it. And I was also just tired. I was so tired of gut protocols. So I was like, I don't care what I have to do or what you're going to have to throw at me, but I'm over it. I'm done. And if the only way to like be done with this is just do the damn thing, it's like, I don't care. Give me whatever prescription you got. I'm not going to fight it. Just hand it over. I'll take it. So that was what we did. And then from there, the stuff that I had to really start doing was priorities. So I think the self-awareness thing is also probably what Kenneth saw a lot of. Was I got way more self-aware than I ever had been. And so I knew one of the big things that was going to bite me in the ass was I get very driven and ambitious in a lot of different things, but the problem is I can overfill my plate to an extreme. And so I had to dial that back. And so what I did was, I wasn't making a ton of money. I didn't have like a huge paying job. And I think partway through it even, I was just going through like a really bad season financially, but I had saved up so much anticipating that it didn't completely royally ruin me. I I was fine. But I started picking and choosing what I needed to focus on right now, and then like what could wait. So one of my friends, Jacob, so we were originally coaching with Atlas, and then they completely like disintegrated. So I was on my own. I was doing a training job in person in Raleigh. I had some clients online, which I still have those. And then I was doing a little bit of posing coaching then. And then after those were done, I wasn't really picking up anybody else. And I just decided like maybe this is a sign I shouldn't push for it right now. And he was starting to be like, well, you need to market this, you need to market that, and like you need to do this on social media and do that. And finally I just told him, I was like, hey buddy, like I love you, dude, shut up. Like I'm not gonna do that. Because I was like, realistically, if I'm looking at the big picture, the best thing I can do is try to get like a foothold as an athlete and get some sort of presence, and then from there I can leverage that to build business later. And I'm like, but the thing is if I bog myself down with so much excess shit that I don't actually need to do that can actually wait, I'm just going to stress myself out. And then like Jacob made up this funny name for me. He called me the quarter whore. So I'm like, we know that I'm a quarter whore. This is a cortisol, whatever. So I was like, it's not smart. The best thing I can do is figure out what I have to do to make sure like my bills are covered and the stuff that I need to pay for in bodybuilding is covered. I have to figure out what things I like doing that I just need to put on hold because financially I can't afford it. So then that way I'm not grinding myself to the bone trying to make a bunch of money. And instead I can slow down a little bit and just focus on doing my prep as best as I possibly can and not be insanely stressed out by all these different endeavors.
Which is a really good point, right? That's a huge point to make for people, whether you're in prep or not in prep, right? Is the health piece to overloading your plate, whether it's working to pay the bills or to have, the car or whatever, or whether it's, having whatever, 12 dogs or 5 children, or I mean, all the things, right? Everybody thinks they have to do all the things all the time. And you kind of went through that phase where you were like, you know what, I have to prioritize what I know works for me, and to be healthy I have to do this because I have a goal.
Yep.
Yeah, and I'll say, kind of touching on the whole cortisol horror thing, I think there's something to that. The people who struggle with knowing that they're stressed love the feeling of being stressed. They love it. They love the thought of they have this and this and this and this to do. Because, and this is really it's a coping mechanism that's failed, right? Because the reason why you would always be busy is because when you slowed down, you had to face your shit and you didn't want to do it. And it was terrible because I always told you that that was the problem, right? And then, it's funny you bring up Jacob. He's now my client.
Yep.
And Jacob is just the younger male version of you that might be worse than you. And he doesn't even know it yet. Yes, if you're listening, Jacob, that is who you are. So, yes, we'll eventually get there. But I really believe that it took the prep to kind of force you to say, okay, for me to be successful and to get as lean as I need to get, I need to address how much I put on my plate. And then you sat in your shit. And then I start seeing this flower sort of open up like, oh, wow, look at her changing things that need to be changed. And she's, even conversations that you and I had in the past that maybe we would have that were similar during the prep, man, it was like smooth sailing. I mean, I don't think we argued on one single thing. And arguing was one of the things that like we did. You know what I mean? Prior to the prep, like arguing was kind of our thing. Like I'd be like, Robbie, you need to do this, and you'd be like, meh, meh, meh. And then eventually you would do it. But like the more and more you grew as a person internally, and you were sitting in your stuff and you were dealing with it, the less we had those scenarios.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, that was a big part of it. And then the second, like another big piece to it was how I started leveraging posing, which has actually worked out because now it's like meshed into my routines that I do on stage, and it comes out just kind of different than what people usually see. But I also knew that my communication wasn't great. And I think you and I've talked about this a little bit, how sometimes I'll talk about posing as like my own like universal language. Because it's really hard for me to be, and it might sound weird hearing me say this, but I'm good at being transparent and vulnerable, kind of, because when I do it, I'm doing it in a way that's very controlled, and this is
And
what I
it's
want
safe
to
for
show you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so with posing, it's a way where I can do it and I'm actually truly being like vulnerable in the moment, and I'm allowing emotions and stuff to come out that normally I wouldn't. And it's usually like if something bad happens and I've processed through it and I can hold myself together and not get emotional, then I can talk about it. So it seems like I'm being very transparent and vulnerable, but it's very controlled in how I do it. To where posing was like, I need to find something that, like, I know that I don't really want to talk when I'm feeling what I'm feeling at a certain time, but like I have to find a way to get these things out. And so a lot of like the routines and stuff I would make, and I would send you, like every single one of them is based on something that I went through, whether it's something in the past, or I think one of them that I did a video for, it was a family issue that I was going through like in the moment as I like made it up, and it ended up being really cool. So having something that I could actually put that out into, so I wasn't internalizing all of that, because everybody says if you don't find a way to let those emotions out, like they're going to find a way out somehow.
Yes.
I love that you found a way that works for you, right? Because
Yeah.
so many people, they're like, oh, they'll tell you you should go to therapy, or you should journal, or you should, and there's a lot of shoulds out there about how people need to access their feelings and to be able to get their feelings out. And you bring out just a really great individual way that you found that worked for you. So I think that's a great thing for our listeners to hear, is that there's no one size fits all. You have to find what works for you. And you did. And it's beautiful.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. And I mean, I love it. And then obviously it transfers over. I mean, it directly is something that I can use in bodybuilding. So it kind of just worked out that way. But I would say those were two big things throughout the prep. I think the third thing was having Scott come into my life. Actually having a really supportive partner who has no idea what bodybuilding is. Everything's new for him.
Zero idea. He's looking at us
Zero
like,
idea.
I have no idea what's going on.
But just knowing, he says one of the things that made him fall in love with me was the fact that he's like, you don't take no for an answer. Like, if you get something in your head that you want to accomplish and you want to achieve it, he was like, you're going to do it. And he was like, you might have a door shut in your face umpteen gazillion times. And he was like, you don't ever once just go, oh, well, I guess that didn't work out. He was like, nope, you just like shift gears and like go another direction. And so he was super, super
That's
supportive.
called childhood trauma.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, it's not all bad. It brings out some good things.
Yeah, I know.
Just a lot of other rotten ones.
Yeah.
But now having him and having the support, and there would be times where I would get caught up in like the big picture of like what I don't do well. I'd still be like months out, and it's like, what if I don't get my pro card, or what if this doesn't happen, or whatever. And one of the other things that he was really supportive of is like my spiritual walk and my faith, and really backing me on doing that. And I remember I was getting kind of stressed out, and we were in the car, we're getting ready to go into the gym, and I was freaking out about, like, like, what if I do this and I do everything right and like it doesn't work out? Like, what if this happens? And I remember he told me something that like really calmed me down, and I don't even think he remembers saying it, but he was like, well, then who's to say that like if this is your purpose and if this is like your calling, that this would be the only way that God would let you walk into it? Like, who's to say that like it doesn't work out, but like maybe that's like the route you have to go? So he's like, you're like looking at it very narrow-minded. And as soon as he said that, I was like, oh, like, well, that makes a whole lot of sense. That was exactly what I needed to hear. And then he would just do some things like, all you need to do today is like, we just need to go inside and you need to worry about the first exercise you need to do. And he was like, one set at a time. And then he was like, as soon as we're done there, we'll go to the next exercise and we'll do it again. And then he was like, as soon as we're done with the gym, he's like, then the next thing, what's the next thing you got to do? You got to go eat something. And he was like, just one step at a time.
He's
so
also
that
the guy that held you accountable to sitting your ass down when I told you to. So that's another thing that if you guys haven't ever been in a prep with me, it's taken a long time for me to get to an understanding of when the person needs to be able to get pulled out of the stress that we're putting on them. So every single time that I put somebody through prep, it's a diet. What's the root word of diet? Die. I'm killing you, right? I'm slowly killing you because I'm starving you to death. And I have to be able to toggle this back and forth so that we don't cause so much damage to your metabolism or whatever you want to call it, so that you can continue to get to the level of conditioning that we need to get to. And that applies to males, females, and anybody that's prepped with me in the last 2 years. I grind your ass, don't I? Like, yeah. I will grind you. I will grind you to the point where it is a come to Jesus meeting. Like, I know that there's where I was going, okay, one more day. And you were like, are you fucking kidding me? But then I'll pull you out of the gym for 2 and 3 days at a time. Or I'll, not only am I going to pull you out of the gym and not make you do cardio, but I feed you like crazy. And you're like, yep. Holy moly. And it can be a little bit of a push and pull, right? Because you're like, yeah. Wait a minute, I should be pushing. I need to be pushing. And then, am I supposed to be eating this much food? This is crazy. Why am I eating this much food? So it's probably an emotional battle, at least that first day. And then the second day and the third day, you're like, oh, can we just stay here? Right? But then it's like, nope, it's time to grind again. So it's a very unique feeling to kind of do that push-pull dance of extremes. And so I know that over the course of time, there were times I gave Robbi rest days because I could just see it on her face, where it was like, mentally, I'm getting ready to lose her. And if I lose her, she's not coming back. So I've got to give her this day. And the one thing that I could do is I could call Scott and say, dude, if she turns the crazy on, cut it off. Make her make her stay on the couch, right? And he was really good at that. And honestly, I'm not saying people can't be successful as single people, but to have somebody that has your back through the process, it's really helpful. But however, here's a caveat. If Scott listens to this, I think he knows this by now, but he got it easy. I mean, this boy got a girl that cooked him breakfast every single morning. You didn't miss a beat. Like, You were in good spirits for most of the time. I think I could count on 4 days. Like there were 4 total days where I was like, whoa, steer clear of Robbie. She's a bitch today. But you know what I mean? But like the majority of the time, you were really pleasant to work with and talk to. And that's another thing. If you're my athlete and you have not done a prep with me, what do I do that no other coach does, Robbi?
There's a lot of things that you do.
No. The main thing, I talk to you every single morning.
Oh,
Like,
that's true. We would
I
talk
talk
for
to you
like an hour.
every single morning for what, 8 weeks? I think it was the 8 week mark
Yeah.
when I started talking to you every single day. No, it was 14 weeks with you. That's what it was. So for the last 14 weeks, the first person I woke up to every single morning was Robbi Jenkins, half naked on my phone. That's what was going on. So if you're my athlete and you haven't gone through prep and you think, man, I bet there's times where people are like, golly, I spend so much money on Kenneth. I get one check in a week or I get one phone call every once in a while. Let me tell you, I make up for it in all the time spent when it comes time to showtime. So just keep that in your hat.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I think part of it too also, and I've experienced this even as a coach, it's like the more that they're putting into,
Yep.
then the more you're gonna put back in as well. Because like somebody's giving
If
you
you give me
100%,
120%, yeah, I'm going to do the same.
yeah.
And especially when there's I'll tell you this. I got one girl, Kimberly Gold. Kimberly Gold right now is my favorite client. When we started, she was like 300 pounds. And she's lifestyle client. She's down. I can't remember what her weight is, but it's significantly down. It's like 20 pounds down now. And something has clicked mentally with her where she is putting forth more effort than I've ever seen her put forth. I think we've been together since August, maybe a little bit before then. And now our check-ins, like we do verbal check-ins because it's what's best for her. Man, I am so excited to call her on Monday morning. I can barely stand it. I'm like, let's go, let's go, let's go. So as soon as I talk to her, she's putting forth so much effort. She's got so much to tell me. She's got so much progress happening that I'm now energized as a coach. So all of you out there, if you're listening to this and you're a client, whether you're Robbi's client, whether you're another person's client or Laura's client, you want to get us going? Fucking get going. And like, we're going to be like, let's go. So, and I know that's how Robbi is because if you ever notice, all my Foundry girls, all my Foundry boys, they all have a piece of me with them. There's always a part of their character that is very similar to my character. And that's what I love about our team. And so as a client, if you're thinking about it, if you want to get us excited, fucking get going. Let's do this thing. And that's what Robbi did. So it was like, yeah, I wanted to talk to her every day because I was like curious if we were going to have a weight drop that morning and if it was going to be 3 pounds or something, you know? So
yeah.
Anyway.
But I think it was good too because I think mentally I looked at it different. I think one of the things that, I mean, some pros will probably still do it too, but one of the things that I see a lot with the amateurs and what I even did up until this last prep was where it changed was you go into prep and you look at it as there's all these things that I can't do now. And I decided, and especially having Scott, because he isn't into bodybuilding, it's like, this is a good thing. I want to make sure this works. I do not want to let this prep ruin that. And so that drove a lot of my attitude as well. And so I think one of the last big like key things that he said in my prep where things really shifted to the point where even he noticed it and got overwhelmed as far as like just stuff and me changing just as a person was, I think it was like the last time that I actually got super stressed. And that was when I was having all the issues with my voice and like wasn't sure what was happening and was like getting really freaked out. And he made the comment. He was like, Robbi, he was like, if I'm the most stable thing that you've got in your life right now, we're in trouble. And he was making like a half-hearted joke about it, but it was like, he was right.
It's
And
true.
so,
It's true.
yeah. And so that's when I really shifted gears and realized, like, you know, he's my partner, but like, he can't be my roots. Like, he can be my partner, but there is like a very specific place for him to be. And if I try to put him anywhere outside of that, or like put too much expectation on him, like, this is going to bust our relationship. And so that's when I really like dove back in. And so every single morning without fail, I would spend quiet time. Um, whether it was listening to a sermon, or I started finding little devotionals. And then by the end of it, like my Bible just has like devotions for each thing set up. So you can do like a weekly devotional or a daily devotional from like front to back cover. So I just started waking up. Like, he's not a morning person either. So I would get up at like 5:30, go get we had like a little coffee machine. So I'd walk down, go get some steps in, go grab that on the way back up. And then I'd go sit in my room, make it super chill. And then for like an hour, I'd have my own quiet time and just get my mind right for the day and try to get rooted in something a lot better, that's more sustainable and not human. And that helped a lot too, because there were mornings where I would wake up feeling pretty on the fringes, but by the time I was done with that, I was back to feeling more stable. And then the last, I think, 2 months of prep, I started doing this thing where I was giving myself 3 things that I could prioritize, and 2 of them never changed. So the first thing was always my relationship with God and deepening that, because I noticed the deeper I kept getting into it, the more stable I was becoming, and everybody could see it. So it's
I'll
like,
attest to it. It was crazy. Like at one point I was like, what is happening? And she was just like, I'm just pursuing my relationship with God. And just to touch on that a little bit too, like I have struggled with my faith over the years. I've had a tremendous amount of difficulty uh, going to church and being raised in the church, and there's a lot of fault there, and there's a lot of doubting along the way. But what I'll say is, there were things that were happening in the prep, and what I mean by that, I guess I'll be more specific. This prep was the easiest one we've ever done, and what I mean is, we like not only me and Robbi, but I think Laura. I mean, you and I talk every day too.
Mhm.
And you could probably say that it was the easiest one that you'd seen me go through.
Yeah.
Um, I know that was for me. I mean, it felt that way to me, and it was just stress free. There was stress free. There was no drama. Every single decision I was very confident in. You know, the communication between you and I was superb. Like I didn't have to worry. Like I didn't worry about you falling off the wagon and binging, or you not getting enough sleep, or whatever the case is. And when you're a client on the other end of this, and your coach is asking you to do all these things, every single one of the things matters.
Mm.
And sometimes you can kind of get into a situation where you're like, well, that thing, it doesn't feel like it matters that much, because you're not looking at it from a big picture standpoint. Now, it helps that Robbi coaches some people, and she's an educated person, and she's learned from some really smart people too. So we're not talking about an amateur in any way. You're a seasoned athlete. But you stepped into a mindset that was so professional that it made every single person that I've coached look like a fucking amateur. And I've got 2 pros on the team, and they know. We've had the conversation. You've had some conversations. They know that there's a new standard. There's a new sheriff in town. Her name's Robbi. And like, you gotta fucking step it up. And so when when I could trust you 100% of the time, God was working on me too.
yeah.
Because I was like, okay, see you over there. This is crazy. And because out of all the people in the history of my clients, if you would have told me that Robbi Jenkins would be perfect and not slip up for 6 months, I'd have told you, you have lost your mind.
I
mean,
would have
there
told
was
you you lost your mind.
exactly, that's what I'm saying. So it's such an interesting thing. And we're not overly religious people here, right? It's not like we're walking down the street asking people if they know their, the Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. So it's something, it'd be one thing if we were that way, but like this is something that it was very apparent, and it was apparent to everyone else in my life who's close to me. So, yeah, it's just been a super cool experience, and I want you to touch on sort of the standard that you set. It's like you told me at one point, I don't really care if I get my pro card because I have to act like one. And whether or not you got your pro card or not, which we didn't, I've set the standard now that I have to act like a pro if I want to be a pro. And that's the one thing. And I've talked to some athletes outside of our team, because the crazy thing is people are watching you and they're asking me questions. They're like, what is going on over there? I mean, even Ryan Farida at one point texted me, who was like, what's gotten into Robbi? She looks the best she's ever looked. And I'm like, she is nailing it, dude. She's nailing it better than you ever did. And he's like, ooh, ouch. So when you made that decision, like when did that decision happen? And you're going through this reverse. And I mean, you've been right on point. I mean, you've enjoyed some things here or there, which is okay. But at the end of the day, you've also, I mean, you decided to pack up and go to Australia. You had a freaking seizure. You went to the hospital. You're away from your significant other. Like, let's just do all the hard things while you're away, right? So, like, I'm counting it as a huge win, but it's still this mindset of being a professional, right?
Yeah. So it, I think the biggest part where it came in for me is I started realizing that this was, I don't know what it's going to look like. I can't tell you what it's going to look like, but I definitely am convinced that like this is like my purpose and the road that like God is pushing me into. And I think when that hit, I realized it's like, if that's the case, like the only way that this is going to work is if I do everything the way that I'm supposed to do it. And so I was just kind of looking at like the quality in which I did stuff. I'm like, one, like bodybuilding's a very, like, it's just a very broken sport. I think I made a post about this the other day, and I started feeling like my journey with it, because I was so transparent when things were absolutely batshit crazy, that now you can see like the whole entire process, that other people, whether they're amateurs or pros, like they can go through and look at it and be like, well, like what changed here? But the thing is like there has to be a change there. Like if I was to go back off the wagon now and completely like go back to what I was doing, like you no longer have that like testimony anymore. You no longer have like that inspiration for other people, because like now you're just going back to like what you were doing before, which is being a nutcase like every other person. So
Yes.
when I really started to believe that like this was my purpose, like I don't know what his timing's going to be with it. I don't know what it's all going to look like, but I look at all of the random things that's happened the last couple of years throughout it, from like working with Kai to meeting Pete to this past weekend at the or 2 weekends ago at the Olympia. There was a classic physique competitor, Laszlo. He knew who I was before I even realized who he was, from like my posing and stuff like that. And so just the random weird little encounters that are happening that like I couldn't explain otherwise, because like I don't have a big following, like I'm not some big like influencer or whatever, but it's just a bunch of these little things that are making me feel like this is truly like where I'm supposed to be. And so if that's the case, like I have to steward this really, really well. And by doing that, that means I also have to watch my behavior and my actions and how I'm conducting things, because now it's like if other people are going to start watching, like that's where it comes into being a leader, is now I have to make sure that I'm doing this stuff right. And it's not to say that I won't ever have times where like I slip up or mess up, but at the end of the day, I have to make sure that, I'm keeping that pace and holding that standard.
And it all
because you're
starts.
calling people out along the way and you don't know it.
Yeah.
And I'm going to give you an example real quick, and then Laura, you can hop in. Competitor Ashley, who's a figure girl who just went pro this past year and works with Team Legacy. She and I chat every once in a while, and she DM'd me about you. She's like, "What is Robbi's story? I have been following this thing, and like I need to know what Robbi's story is." And I was like, "Well, just wait till the podcast comes out." And so, she said, it's been really inspiring to watch how this has unfolded. And I said, well, I even said, I was like, she's acted more like a pro than any other client that I've ever coached. And at this point, that stepped on her toes because she's a pro. And she said that just the other day, she texted me, she was like, by the way, that stepped on my toes so bad that I went back and started doing what I was supposed to do with my coach, and I dropped 4.5 pounds or 4.7 pounds. And so, like, you are impacting other people's day-to-day actions because you're making it make sense. That's what I think. That's what you're doing. It's like, oh, when I do what I'm supposed to do, then the results come. And it's not just about winning the pro card, but they saw the mental transformation. They saw the physical transformation. They're seeing all of this transformation. And Laura, what are we in the game for? What are we in this game for? Fucking changing people's lives.
Yeah.
Right? That's what we're here for. I don't want to just get pro cards. I don't want to just, like make people look pretty and lose weight or whatever. Like, fuck that. I'm trying to change some lives. And so if you're executing the plan and it's changed your life, you're a tool that God's using, that I get to use, that is an example that's going to change people's lives. So small little soapbox.
And honestly, that's kind of, I'm always the one that brings in the perspective from lifestyle clients, right? Because that's who I work with. I always work with lifestyle clients. And I think, even when I first started talking with Kenneth and working with Kenneth, I was like, yeah, I don't really see how that bodybuilding stuff has anything to do necessarily with what I do. I can kind of get there, but this right here is what we talk to our lifestyle clients about all the time, right? Is we try to change your mindset. We need you to believe in it. We need you to do the actions, because when you do the actions, that also helps change your mindset. You get that catch-22 in there, and you become that person. You become what you want to become inside and outside. And you are the perfect example of that, because it wasn't just, I'm going to follow my coach's plan because he tells me to do it, mindlessly do this because I want this pro card. You owned it. Like, you took ownership of, I want this in my life, and I know that I have to change, and I know that I have to do these things because of who I am and because of what I want to do and who I want to present in this life. Whether or not someone is standing there watching you do it every minute of the day, you did it. You did it.
Yeah.
And that takes so much internal strength to do that, which you didn't have before, right? That wasn't happening for you before. And that, I think, is what, if we're not being professional bodybuilders or aspiring to that, that's what we need to take away from this. If we are a lifestyle client working with a coach, like with Kenneth or you or me, is do what we tell you to do, because we know that's going to help you, and do it when we're not looking at you. Right.
Yep.
And you have to believe that that's what's going to get you there. And it does every time.
Yep. And I
Yeah,
told Kenneth,
and I'll say, go ahead.
oh, I was going to say, like, and I told you even after, because I mean, yeah, it's, I mean, I guess it's kind of a bummer walking away from the Olympia and not having a pro card. But then I was getting ready to say it, and I was like, I'm actually really not that bummed though. But like I'd even told you, I was like, I'm not really actually that unhappy with walking away not a pro. Because then I was thinking about it, and I'm like, maybe this is the space I'm supposed to be in. Because if right now, like, you have a bunch of amateurs out there that are doing it for the same reasons I was when I first got in, and having all of these like external reasons for why you want to compete and why you want this trophy or that trophy or this recognition or that recognition, like, it doesn't heal you. It doesn't do anything. So it's like, maybe my spot is supposed to be for a while is to be in the amateurs and be like the amateur that conducts yourself as a pro. And through that can be like, hey guys, like, I know you're looking at like the pro card, like trying to get the pro card and you're trying to get all this stuff, but like bodybuilding is so much more than that. And like, if you can grasp that as an amateur athlete, like, you're going to make the transition into a pro if you get there so much smoother, and you're going to like yourself while you do it. So I mean, I'm
The
not
other
even.
thing too, I think at the end of the day, I wasn't upset. I mean, I thought maybe middle of the prep, if it doesn't happen, I'm just gonna be beside myself because we just put so much work into it. But by the day we showed up, I think we both kind of knew it was like, today's probably not going to be the day. Um,
Yeah.
there were some big ass bitches there. I mean, holy moly. B, there was just something in the air. It just felt like it wasn't our time for whatever reason. And I sat there with Scott, and I was okay with it because what I realized was you and I did everything right. There was nothing that we could go back on and we could be disappointed about. We executed every single thing. I made really good decisions. You made really good decisions. Like, everything was right. So there was no blame one way or the other or anything. And, when I think about it, I think we both said this via text. There's just a bigger end of the story here.
Yeah.
And that's kind of why I wanted to have you on the podcast, is because we don't know when it's going to end, right? And honestly, like, the ultimate goal for you and I, at least we've talked about for the last couple of years, is you on the Olympia stage. That's the goal. And I've got two other clients that want to be on the Olympia stage. And boy, do I want to coach on that level so bad. I can taste it. It's like those nickels in your mouth, it's like, let's go. But at the end of the day, I love the fact that I don't recognize myself from the very first time I prepped you.
Yep.
And not only from like a mental health perspective, but man, I am not even close to the same coach. And
Yep.
here's the deal. I'm a really, really fantastic coach. So by the time we get to the goal, how fucking badass am I going to be? And how badass are you going to be? Like, that's how cool it is, right? So, like,
Yeah.
I even think about our lifestyle clients. Like, Laura is one walking badass fucking coach. Like, if you just listen to your coach, just wait till the end, because not only are you going to be a badass, but so is your coach. And it's so much more fun that way. And
Yeah.
it's, why don't we make it fun instead of just making it like, well, I gotta, Laura told me I couldn't go to the gym today. And it's like, well, yeah, because we have your best interest at heart. And you said that earlier. And like, I want to loop back around and say, all three people on this podcast, if you're any of our clients or you're thinking about being our client, that is one thing I can tell you. all three of us have your best interest at heart, and we don't even fucking know your name yet because we love people. And that's the change that we want to see in the industry.
Yep.
So what's next, guys? Let's give everybody just a little preview before we wrap this up here quick. What are you doing? Where are you going? How's this going to look moving forward?
So
I think go ahead.
I told Kenneth that because he was laughing about how I picked the hardest show I could possibly do this year to try to get my pro card. But I did
So
tell
explain that. Explain that. Because not everybody knows that.
Oh, picking the hardest show. So when I was working with Kai last year for a little bit, one of the things that he had mentioned, one of the points that he had brought up with shows nowadays versus when he was a pro, was the pro card was like a very rare thing. Like they were only going to give out like 5 a year total. And he was like, so when you became a pro, you were ready. He was like, you were basically tried and tested, and like you had to go through all of the shit that would make you a good professional athlete. And he was like, your value as a pro, because there was less of you, like there were more opportunities. And he felt like that a lot of that is missing now because there are so many pro cards that are given out. And I've seen that. And I think, Kenneth, you've seen that too, even on like the amateur level, is people go to become pros and they're not ready. Like in previous years, I was never ready. Like, I'm glad that I didn't. I would have gotten eaten alive. And if it wasn't by other people, it would have been by my own like mental insanity. So I told Kenneth what I want to do is I don't want to compete again until I'm big enough to take it at like the biggest show. Cause I was like, I feel like that was how it used to be back in the day. And like, that's the standard that I want to set to. So it's like, if we have to do a couple year off season to get me the size that I need, so be it. But I don't want to do a show that's an easy show to get a pro card. Like I want to be one of those that when I come back, I've earned it. I've took the time. I've been patient. I've been consistent. And like, we've just done it the right way, like the way that it used to be.
Yeah, and I think in conjunction with that too is like where the responsibility lays on my shoulders as the coach to make sure that, you know, from a PED standpoint, from performance enhancing drug standpoint, you know, we're dealing with androgens with females. And, you know, the beautiful thing about PEDs is, man, I could change Robbi in 20 minutes if I wanted to. And she looked like a grown ass dude. But that is irresponsible. And the plan is to keep Robbi as feminine as she is today and put as much muscle on her as possible. And so what that's going to take is a slower, more methodical, strategic approach, not only from a PED standpoint, but from an off season. And let me say this, guys and girls, Robbi's never had an off season, ever. So I'm just excited about that part. And it's going to be interesting to see how your body responds, because there's one psycho that's still left, and that's the person that walks into the gym. She's a psychotic person in the gym. And so once we get her central nervous system straight and her body squared away, and I get to feed this girl, I'm just excited about watching the content come out of the gym, because it's going to be scary, boys and girls.
All right. I think that's a great note to end on. It sounds like a growth phase is coming, which will be really, really exciting. Robbi, thanks for joining us again today. Thanks for telling your story. I know that as we move forward throughout the next year-ish, we will definitely be hearing more from you about how things are going. So super excited to have you back on the podcast again. Hopefully you'll join us again. And Kenneth, thanks for being the superstar you are. Appreciate you coming on today too, you guys. All right.
Thanks, Laura.
Hey, listeners, if you have questions for any of us, please drop them in the comments, hit us on Instagram or Facebook. And let us know what your questions are. We can always answer them on a Q&A later. We can have Robbi back. You can find her on Instagram. I will list her in the show notes also. So if you have questions, you can get a hold of her. Everybody, it was good to be here today. Have a wonderful rest of your week. And Robbi, stay out of the hospital. Come back home safe.
All right. I'll do my best.
All right.